Says we're live now. I will double check as per usual. But in the meantime, Andrew, welcome to the show. How was your Christmas vacation?
That was excellent. I was home for a month. Very nice to be home. It made me want to come home 100%.
You want to move? You moving back? I don't know. This
Hopefully,
might.
but
We're going to have to figure out a new schedule then, because you're going to be hours different than you are now.
it's like 1 to 2 hours difference. Fine.
Yeah, I'm not. I think you might. I think at this point you're literally so far away that moving in any direction gets you closer. I
I'm as opposite.
I think you're literally at
as
the
possible.
opposite. So did you?
Yeah, it could be.
I guess. What have you been up to? And do you got anything to shill today? Or the two big questions. So did you
Nothing.
didn't you do like a mod?
Yeah. I have the slice of the mod on world building, just my setting. I wrote like 11 pages of timeline, which only ends up amounting to like the mythic age, and 6 pages are for 150 years of history. So there's a heck of a lot that goes into that apparently. And I've been using Axe, Adventure Conquer King system, the Judge's Journal to build my world and stuff. So that's good stuff. That's good stuff.
Good, good. Also, last time we did streaming, your game jam had just was on the verge of closing. How did that end up going?
Oh yeah, we got a good few submissions, and less than last time. I don't remember exactly how many, but yeah, people seem to enjoy that at least.
Got any new game jams coming up anytime soon?
Not anytime soon. I want to do one in the summer. I don't know when exactly in the summer. Presumably, well, that's the thing. I don't know when all of my. For all I know, I may very well end up just staying here. I don't know what's gonna happen, but once it's all figured out, I'll figure out when to do the game jam.
Uh, I have been up to not a whole lot. I've been spending a lot of time developing my big world building project. And
Excellent.
one of the things I've realized is when you do normally are in the common lexicon and everyone hears about are growers and architects. And so typically I do growing, so I thought it might be a nice change of pace to do this. And I understand a lot more. One of the interesting things when you do Tolkien scholarship is it's kind of like doing scholarship into any sort of like into like a history of any sort of art. Like if you look at
Mm.
uh like ancient religions and how they morph over time, it's very similar. Like I'll watch a thing where someone's talking about like Tolkien and his what's it called the his version of Ragnarok in the Middle Earth world, and like they'll add like these things like this is
Oh,
actually part of a very early set of writings, so by the time we have this writing, this may have changed, and so this may no longer be applicable. Like they're doing historical like mythological analysis on it, and to be fair, this is essentially what Tolkien was writing. But like the Balrogs are a good example of this, because in the first time I heard about the Similarian was from someone else who had read it, and they talked about how in like the first ages, the Balrogs were like these. Everyone was power scaled up, so the Balrogs were like these foot soldiers, and there were tons of armies of them. And this is true if you read the very early Tolkien writings. But then this changes, and so depending on which time frame you're looking at Tolkien, by the end of it, there's only like 7 Balrogs who have ever existed. And I get it because as I'm
oh,
doing some architect work myself, you're constantly going back and rewriting shit you've already done. And so there's a lot
yeah,
where you're like you
totally.
put
I'm
something
seeing
in
that too.
and you'll leave it cuz it works. And it's sort of like this you're crafting this theory of the world until like all the other pieces are so opposed to the thing you've previously written that you have to go back and rewrite it. And this might be one of the downsides to using
Oh,
something.
and then like,
Sorry, go
do
ahead.
you ever have moments where like, do you ever have moments where you realize where it's like, wait a second, these guys could have done this whole time. They totally would have. Well, that changes everything.
Yes, I'm working a bit on so right now I've gotten to the point where I've had to go like hardcore basics. So I've been studying
Mm.
alchemy for the past couple weeks. I have I have
Dang.
some I went and first thing I did was I learned about how to properly take notes. So I couldn't take notes on alchemy as I was learning it.
Okay.
But yeah, I found a couple of a few lecturers who have like studied it, who did a couple of videos, and from them I got some links to some books. Like the one I got recommended a lot was the Summa Perfectica, which is basically the
Mm.
medieval alchemist textbook that all the alchemists started with. Because it's like the only one where the person writing is actually attempting to write a textbook and not like a secret tome. And it's one of the few that
Oh.
has, because most alchemical texts are basically
Sorry,
some
Max.
guys.
I'm gonna have to step out for a few minutes, but you keep telling them, and I'll catch up. Be right
Okay,
back.
so for it's here's the way to describe it. Have you ever seen any like death metal bands? They have like their name in like the death metal letters, and you can't fucking read them because you're not supposed to really be able to. It's a signal for like an in group. Uh, I'm trying to remember. I had a course that covered this. It might have been recreation studies. I can't remember. But there's signifiers for in groups in different constructions because you well because generally humans sort of like to help the in group and don't like the out group. And there is gatekeeping in just regular fandoms, let alone if you have this sort of essentially it's not really science yet, but it's not full magic, but sort of a mystical art form, right? You human beings sort of have the innate desire to keep things in because if you give that out, you give up your advantage. And so similarly to our death metal friends who make it impossible to read their logo so the outsiders can't infiltrate. It's a form of gatekeeping essentially. Alchemists do the same sort of thing where things will be deliberately written in a way that's a little obscure and obtuse, and so it's very difficult for like a reader to that doesn't know anything. If you don't already know about alchemy, it's hard to read these texts. And even still, like I've tons of the reviews I got on the what I saw from the Summa Perfecticas, even then it's going to be impossible for you to read. This is why you have to get a critical edition, and generally, I highly recommend critical editions for anything because it's very hard to tell what's going on if you don't have surround critical editions to provide those contexts. Uh, for example, in Germanicus, right, the Roman text about Germany. There's this section where they're citing the gods the Germans worship, and like if you just a raw text, you're like I don't really know who these are. Assuming I think in Germanicus he uses. So generally in Roman texts they use the names of Roman gods in place. I can't remember if in the German texts I would assume it's been a while since I read it, but I think in Germanicus they also do. But the point is you get this context for it's like okay when they're thinking this they mean these sorts of attributes, and these sorts of attributes, these sorts of god have these sorts of attributes from that region, from that time, that sort of map on. So we think it's this and this, but we're not quite sure. And so this is one of the benefits of reading a critical edition of Summa Perfectica. They're like, this is what he means when he says this. And it's all in Latin, so it's like they'll do the translations, and they'll do like a modern. This is what he's saying, this is what he means. And then on top of that, they'll have like a section where it's like, we've translated it this word in this way for these reasons, and they'll list out like the argument itself for why the translation has occurred in this way. So there's a lot of benefit to doing a I really like critical editions. Generally, if it's a subject you don't know anything about, critical editions are always better. Because if it's someone who's actually written a critical edition, they almost certainly know more than you do. Unless you're reading some like weird conspiracy shit, but you know. But yeah. Part of the problem was I had to figure out how I wanted to sort of generate. Since I'm already architecting, I may as well generate a full system for how everything works. And so very early on, Andrew saw this. I built out an elemental system, and I just wasn't happy with it. So I ended up scrapping it and attempting again, and then that one I didn't like, so I scrapped it again. And I was always like inspired by alchemy, but at some point I just I did a couple of these and I wasn't happy with them, so I just said fuck it, let's just learn it. Why not, right? Let's just learn it. And so I decided to find some resources and take some notes. And it's and part of the reason was I wanted to create a fully sustainable, functional, internally coherent system, and then try and find things to do with that. So like using sort of predictive power. This is going to be a key term that's going to come up in a few seconds. I could see like, oh well, this does this, and well, hold on, I could combine these together and do this with it, and have sort of interesting things like that, and that might set it apart as a little bit unique because of its own internal system. Also, it was kind of cool as a concept, and I wanted to make the world make sense with magic. And it seemed like integrating it would be better than just having science and slapping magic on top of it. So I decided I'll just learn alchemy, and the interesting thing about alchemy is that it has no predictive power. That's not entirely true. It has some, but when the alchemists are writing, this is sort of before the scientific method, so they're not super concerned with predictability. They're concerned with explainability. So the sort of system is, this is our explanation, and this is why the Summa Perfectica is a pretty decent book compared to a lot of other ones, because the Summa Perfecta is what sort of in concert with lab and theory. There's a couple other ones that are like this. There's an Islamic source that's like super not highly held. It's not regarded very well in Islamic countries, because I assume because it's not Muslim. Well, it's not that it's not Muslim. It's or I guess it's not Islamic. But it's very much sort of mystical, I guess, at least from perception. But the interesting ones, and the ones that I think are worth reading, at least for my purposes, are the ones that have that sort of concert. So what will happen is, here is how the world works. We now have our full theory, our hypothesis, which comes from Aristotle, my favorite philosopher, Meteorologica, his most popular book until recently, because he's just wrong about everything. Not his fault, really, though. He's there's a reason it's so popular. It's because it's the best. It's just wrong, but it's better than all the other ones. But you have this theory of the world, and then you attempt to apply the theory, and the theory's wrong, so it doesn't quite work. So what do? You find an explanation, a new reason, like, okay, this didn't work like it was supposed to. Why not? Here's an explanation for why this thing happens in this theoretical system. And that's sort of how they build on onto it. And so it's very odd because I'm trying to get it for its predictive power, and it has very little predictive power. But I'm getting the sort of the basics, and I think I have a pretty decent idea of how I'm going to do the rest. I have a pretty basic idea of how the system's going to work now. I'm gonna learn it a bit more because why not? There's still like a bunch of stuff that I think will be useful later. Um, but yeah, the whole point is doing all this background stuff, so I just have it, and it's like it's a cool exercise because even if you're like someone who's into growing the world like I do, it's by doing things in this way, it forces you to think about things you might not have otherwise thought about. So like one of the things like Mithril, for example. Mithril is super interesting. Like it makes sense in Tolkien's world because it's very much Tolkien's fantasy is fairy tale fantasy. Right? It's a fairy story. He writes at length about the importance of fairy stories, but things sort of there's sort of an innate it's sort of like what's a good word for it? A lot of early mythology has what Dr. Jackson Crawford would refer to as a dream-like quality. And I agree with him where stuff happens and the things are logically like they follow one another, they obey cause and effect. But they follow a sort of dream logic. So the example that he gives, I think, is like a really good example of this, is when in the Volsunga saga, which is fantastic, by the way. If you have not read the Volsung saga, the saga of the Volsungs, it's basically the entire family tree of Siegfried, who's the big Germanic dragon-slaying hero. And it goes from like his earliest. He's descended from Odin, I believe, at least in some versions. I don't remember if it's in just one or both the Scandinavian and the German one, the Nibelungslied. But goes through them. It's a very good read. But there's this story in it where basically this the males of the family get captured, and there's this wolf that's coming to eat them. And so how they get around this is the girl puts like honey on his tongue. And when the wolf comes to lick up the honey, he bites the tongue, and that's how he defeats the wolf. Which like it logically follows, but it's also a bit like boy, but it works because it's this sort of mythological story. And so when you do these sorts of growing stories, you sort of put these things in that have this sort of dream quality to it. But one of the nice things about practicing this way, right, you don't have to do this for all of them. There's nothing wrong with like the dream-esque sort of the fairy story. But it gets you to think about things in a way that you wouldn't otherwise think about. Welcome back, Andrew. I'm just talking about architecture
I feel
versus growing.
yeah, no, I was listening to the alchemy discussions, Aristotle. I'm curious about what that ends up being like, but I feel like for mythologies, you should still know what actually happened, even if you're gonna have actually like mythological versions of those stories. Um, like in I've tried to make an effort to be like, okay, here's what actually happens in the mythological time. That's gonna change as different cultures emerge that aren't preserving the actual story, and not everyone who is preserving the story actually knows everything that happened. So that's where you end up with mythological versions of those stories. But yeah.
I've been thinking about this a little bit recently, and what I think is happening in the sort of fairy stories, it's not that we might not know what's literally happening, but what I think is happening is they're doing a bit of a shortcut, or not quite a shortcut. is a thing that's happening, and there is a thing that's explained that is the reason why, but it's a subconscious reason. So, for example, in alchemy, Meteorologica gets released, and they translate it into Arabic. And as part of the translation, it turns into a bit of a critical edition, where this Islamic scholar adds a bit to it. I can't remember if it's Jabir or someone else. But what happens is, as the text gets translated and spread, it gets a little corrupted. And that critical part of it gets added on to Aristotle's work as if it were a part of Aristotle's work, and then things are translated a bit wonkily in certain places. And so this idea emerges that actually Aristotelian alchemy is anti-transmutation. Like, it can't be done. The magnum opus, the turning of metals into gold, isn't possible. So so the other piece of context to understand what happens next is a ton of people will write under different names. So the Summa Perfectica is listed as being written by... Is it written by... I can't remember who it's listed as being written by. It might have been Aristotle. It might have been someone else. But it's actually written by a guy named Paul of Toronto. Not our Toronto, a Spanish Toronto. But he writes under that name. And there's actually a similar thing, I think, in like the New Testament. Some of the letters are not actually written by Paul. Some of them are, and then some of them are later, where people are writing under the name of Paul. I can't remember the details around that. You would know better than I would. But there, for most of, for medieval history and a lot of, and even before that, there's a lot of people writing under pseudonyms of other people. And this is like a common practice. But, so, with those two pieces of context, we come to medieval Europe. And they're trying to transmute into gold through their alchemy. And they have Aristotle, seemingly, because Aristotle gets translated from the Greek into the Arabic, then back into the European languages. And so, how do you deal with this, Andrew? You have essentially the guy who founded all of alchemy telling you the one thing you're trying to do won't work. So what do? Do you know, Andrew? I'll tell you.
You just make stuff up?
You write under the name of Hermes, who is an older author.
Oh.
And so he's an alchemist from before Aristotle. And for some reason, right, from a rhetorical analysis, this is more convincing, because he's like, he is the one who knows the full truth. He's the older, he's the original, he's way back. He's the one who knows the real truth. Right? And you see this idea in like a lot of different things. Like people want the traditional martial arts. Right? Why learn Muay Thai when you can learn Muay Baron? Right? And there's like this idea of this secret ancient techniques that have been lost, which in practical analysis makes no fucking sense. Right? We wouldn't say general relativity seems like kind of bullshit. Newton never believed in it. Like, no. Einstein had the access to Newton, and he innovated, and he did something way better. But for some reason.
But then I don't know, because like if you look at Aikido, for example, what Aikido is now is like a weird non-anything basically dance sort of. But what it used to be was super useful in like sword fighting and stuff like that, where you could contend with guys who are coming at you with swords, if you didn't have one, or potentially even if you did have one. But
Yeah,
it's over time, it's become more and more just like a dance.
So I mean,
Less practical.
The practical answer to this is whatever it is adapting to sort of meet the times. So, the answer to like why Aikido is the way it is, if I were to guess, it's probably because we're not sword fighting that often anymore. And so,
Yep, exactly. So if you wanted a practical version of Aikido, you would do the parents of Aikido. You would want to look into how they actually use it when they were fighting in like the samurai age or whatever. I don't know exactly what the time periods would have been. It probably wasn't that long ago. It was probably like because like they have photos of the guy who created Aikido.
well, here's something that might
Yeah.
blow your mind. The samurai
Mhm.
period in Japan and the Wild West in America was close enough to the same time that
Mhm.
there 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 could have been an event where a cowboy and a samurai walked into a bar together. This They were contemporaneous enough that that was physically possible. I don't know if it ever happened. I have doubts. I don't know why a cowboy would be in Japan
Quite
or a
a story.
samurai, but in theory, right? It could happen. Um, but yeah, to give you a sense of the time period. Um, to be fair, this is probably a large part due to Japanese isolationist policy prevented like a lot of technological adaptation for a long time until the Meiji Restoration came in and they just went whole hog and beat the shit out of Russia. But um, but yeah, so there I don't want to say that going back to like these ancient sources are never beneficial for any reason whatsoever. There are cases where it does make sense, right? But the sort of I'm saying that human brains have a bit of a shortcut where for some reason older is better. And if I were to put forward a hypothesis as to why this is, I'm going to guess that it has something to do with like the sort of an innate evolutionary, somewhat conservative mindset where like for the past 1,000 years we didn't go walking into the lion den. So it's probably a good idea not to go walking to the lion den because it's worked for so goddamn long. Whereas the person who says, you know what? Everyone says we shouldn't walk into the lion's den, but I haven't seen anyone coming back from the lion's den who said it was a bad idea. Why don't? But it's sort of interesting from a rhetorical perspective because it seems like there's
So
this
much fun in
idea.
the Lions Den that people don't want to leave.
Listen, Daniel got away with it once, and he had God on his side. Okay, wouldn't recommend it for anyone else. But the point is that there's sort of this rhetorical shortcut in people in like the in sort of the collective consciousness where the older something is, the more of a mystical sort of nature it has to it. Right? There's a reason why like if you look like if I ask you what philosophers you've read, I would put money down that the majority of the philosophers you have read existed prior to guns. Right?
Prior to who?
I'm saying if we catalog
I didn't
every
catch that. Prior
person,
to who?
I'm saying if you took any random person off the street, and you went through what philosophers they had read, I would say on average they've read more pre-gun than post-gun philosophers.
Oh, pre-gun.
Right.
Gotcha.
I'm just picking the gun at sort of
Well, do people even read philosophers that much?
sorry, what was that?
Do people even read philosophers that much?
I would guess most people don't read much philosophy, but I think they've read some, right? Because I feel like you read a little bit in school at least.
I think most people read like Nietzsche, and, like
I
I don't
think
know, conservatives read Ayn Rand.
I think I think people say they like Nietzsche. I don't think people actually read. I don't think that people.
Read I don't know Jean-Paul Sartre or whatever.
I oh we're playing Arcane for some reason. Oopsie doopsie.
I I don't know. I paused it again. It seemed to. It's playing again. What? Pause it again.
Oh, you know what's happening? I think you might be pausing it and I'm
What?
pausing it. And so it's just pausing and unpausing. Okay, it's paused.
Oh.
Here's so Nietzsche. I think people will say they like Nietzsche and they might read some snippets of Nietzsche. I don't think people have actually. I don't think most people read their books. Read his books because I went and tried to read Nietzsche, and the first thing I got was, which book should I start with? And I got like a fucking essay on where might be the best place to start depending on what you in all this fucking like. Maybe you should read the ending of this book, then read the intro to this book, then read this
Oh
separate book,
no.
then read the first book. I'm like, I don't think anyone's putting in the effort to do that who isn't a philosopher. But I
Yeah.
think um you might be here's the thing. Like Jean-Paul Sartre, Kant, Nietzsche. If you grab someone off the street randomly and ask them to name a philosopher, I think probably you're going to get Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are the ones you're going to get most of the time.
Mm.
And then,
Yeah.
I think if I think those are the guys who are going to get cited the most. Um, and people will cite Diogenes because he's Diogenes and he's fucking hilarious. But then I think maybe if like I think if you stopped and asked someone who Aristotle was, they'd tell you he's a philosopher. I think if you asked most people who like Jean Paul Sartre is or who Kant is, they would either have like no idea or they might recognize the name but not be able to tell you anything about like what they believed. And I think if you're religious,
Yeah.
if you're like a religious Catholic, you'll hear Thomas Aquinas. That's my prediction for the hyper Catholic, Thomas Aquinas. Um, and then maybe some modern ones. You might hear like Slavoj Žižek or like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably.
But I think when most people get into philosophy, the first thing they do
You're
is read
some
the
really
Greeks.
philosopher.
Who's what?
Is Peterson a philosopher? I don't know if he is.
Um,
I
I
guess maybe.
I think probably I guess it kind of depends what era of Peterson. I think probably like he's doing he's sort of on the trans crusade now, and he's behind like he's on the Daily Wire stuff, and I think maybe now I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of it. The thing is, so he starts off as a psychologist, and a lot of psychology I think is sort of I think that's pretty much in philosophy, right? The fundamental thing that Peterson was doing, I'll just call it the YouTube period, was he was like going, he was like, hey, here are some guidelines, a rule set, a moral framework for how you should live your life uh, in a good way, essentially, which is really sort of the point of a lot of philosophy. What is the ethical and moral thing to do? And I think he's putting. I think 12. I think I'm pretty confident in 12 Rules for Life is a philosophical work. Right now, the philosophy is bolstered and underpinned by psychology. These are the reasons why I think these things are good for you and you should do them. But ultimately, it is essentially a framework by which to live one's life, which is sort of the original goal of like philosophy gets more complicated. There's like a ton of different divisions, but I think very one of the mainstay one of the hallmarks, one of the most clear versions of philosophy is how one should live one's life. And I think Jordan's doing that in like 12 Rules for Life and a lot of the other surrounding stuff. Philosophy kind of bleeds into everything else, so it's hard to say where like it stops. In a lot of those works is not only how one should live his life, but there's also like an element of the quest for truth, which is also one of the big big purposes of philosophy. So I think yeah, I think he's engaged in philosophy. I don't know much about now because he's like on Daily Wire and it's paywalled, and I don't know as much, but that's my impression. Um,
Makes sense, more or less.
yeah, and
Do you have any
favorite movie.
opinions on the Daily Wire movies?
I have not seen any of them, so
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know. I saw Shu on Head's review of Lady Ballers. Um, it's I haven't seen it, so I don't want to like I don't want to say anything because I don't think it's really fair for me to see a review that was kind of met on it and then like pass that opinion off as my own. I feel like I'd have to see it first. Uh,
Sure.
so I just I don't know.
Uh, Based on trailers and past Daily Wire movies, I'm not really either impressed or enticed to watch their stuff. Like, I like what they're doing. I like that they're doing it. I think it's important. But they also have to, they can't just be like, we're gonna make conservative movies. They have to just be like, we're gonna make good movies and sure, tell good messages or whatever. But like, the acting has to be good. The writing has to be good. The one I've only seen Run, Hide, Fight. I think it's the only one I've seen. I did not like that movie at all. It was dumb and boring
Yeah, my general
and
position
poorly acted.
more is a limit on the art that they can sort of experience. You have an obligation to make art for children good. Uh, I think that's not. Whereas, like just general art, you don't have that same obligation because there's you can experience sort of any art anywhere. There's so much choice. If you're 18 and you want to experience art, there is effectively unlimited, infinite choice of arts. And so I'm less concerned if it's adult or it's content, general content, as opposed to content for children. Um, that said, I also part of the rule is more art, more good. It has to be art. And part of the thing that makes me a little the big issue with a lot of art nowadays is it's not really art. Well, this is a contentious argument, but I would make the argument based on my personal definitions that a lot of art actually falls under propaganda. And so when you say stuff like I'm going to make conservative movies, this feels it I won't say because it sort of depends, right? It's not an encouraging statement, right? If I said I'm going to make feminist movies, or I'm going to make woke movies, or I'm going to make communist movies, or I'm going to make fascist movies, or like it doesn't sound right. This is like okay, we're getting into some dicey territory, which isn't to say that can't be done, right? The one of the best examples of this is Prince of Egypt, right? It's a religious movie, religious, um, and some would make the argument divinely inspired, and I wouldn't argue against them. That's really good. So it's not to say that just because something is in this camp that it can't be good, right?
Yeah, we watched when I was back home, my friends and I watched a super like it very much like was this like anti-racist sort of thing that which kind of bothered me because like the black guy was definitely racist. He was like, I'm uncomfortable around this many white people, and the white people were kind of awkward, but they weren't being malicious until later on it turned out that they were super malicious because it was a really, really good movie, even like despite the clear like ideological thing of like, oh, there's so much racism in the world. Um, gosh, what was it called? It was called Get Out.
Oh yeah, the
Um,
Jordan Peele movie.
uh, yes, yeah, yeah, it was really quite good. Um, and yeah, it was just like it was extremely well acted. That was like really, really good. And like the atmosphere was very well done. The way the movie was shot, very spooky, very creepy.
Yeah, I think
And it was the propaganda was like definitely there, but that's the sort of movie that you should make if you want to get like your ideology across. You should still realize that like you're not giving a conference to a bunch of people who think like you and are going to pay you. You should think of it as I'm creating art backed by my ideology because it's getting my ideology through. Um, like Tolkien. Tolkien wasn't out there to be like, and then Frodo discovered the book of the gospel and converted to Catholicism. He was like, and then Frodo succumbed to temptation, but good won anyway, and that's my backbone that I get from Catholicism that I'm just like emanating to like create this story. Like you have this good foundation, this good intention behind it, but you're able to still recognize like I'm writing a story, and for a story to work and for a story even to get the message across that you want to get across, it has to not be self-referential. It has to not understand itself as a message-telling device.
I think this might be why like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and that whole series is viewed well. The Tolkien is always placed higher, despite the fact that they were in the same place, the same time. They had a lot of success, and they were both friends. I think the
Yep.
allegorical nature of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in that series hampers it. Because I remember when I grew up reading that with my dad. Um, and I remember I think we got to Prince Caspian, and then I later found out that like it's all an allegory for Jesus. I'm like, I don't want to fucking read this shit anymore. That's not
Oh.
right. Whereas in Tolkien, movies, I remember thinking like this is just hyper. It's too much allegorical. It's too much. Not like Tolkien. Tolkien, like if you watch the movies, you have no idea who the gods are. I don't know if that's quite the same in the books. Like, there's a lot of references that indicate like Ulmo is sort of working and whatnot. But like the
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
what Tolkien has done very well
Um,
is he's fused a lot of the pagan stuff with a sort of Christian framework. But what he's done well is he's implemented sort of the ideas of good and evil, that moral framework of right and wrong from Christianity into the story in a way where it's not like this is the right thing because Jesus Christ our Lord and Savior said it's the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's why his work is a little stronger than the Narnia series.
well, so I guess I appreciate what Lewis was trying to do, and I don't know if either Tolkien or Lewis were like, I'm gonna create a story to like evangelize to people. And I think if they were trying to do that, which I don't think they were, but I think if that was the intention, I think that's a fine intention. Um, but I think even if that wasn't Tolkien's intention, he actually like succeeded at doing that more than Lewis did, and I think his intention than Tolkien's, because now what
Oh, you've cut out. We got now what you.
and you can see that in this book, and like they like even though they don't care about that, like they appreciate that, and they appreciate the takeaways that it has, and they kind of like um kind of like get it, and like even like Mahler was talking about like recognizing that like the ring and like Frodo sparing Gollum and stuff, that later like Frodo fails, but then like the ring is still destroyed because of like evil, like basically the equivalent of God is allowing evil to happen in order to destroy evil, which is precisely how Catholics understand it, which is that like um, God will allow evil And then, for example, with like crucifixion, he'll like use like people's like pride and like wanting to like reject God and stuff and killing God made flesh to then bring about like the cure for sin, basically, choosing to do it that way. And so, even though that comes from like a Catholic idea, it's like people will then look at that and be like, "That's really interesting. Like I've never like thought about that and like appreciate kind of like I don't know, think at least at the very least just like thinking about that." So, whereas for Lewis, people will have like the reaction that you said, right? Like, um, you were a lot more like not just not believing in Christianity or anything, but like you're more um I
Yeah, I
guess
used to be like pretty
how do you put it?
hyper
Argumentative.
anti-Christian. I think like I've changed
Yeah,
on that in some more recent times. But as a kid, I think I was very much in the
more of that sort of attitude then or whatever. But you're like, why would I ever read this if I'm like it gives you that like surely if Lewis was like, oh, I'm gonna show all these kids that because like Christianity is cool. If they already think it's not, they're not gonna want to read it. What's it's counterproductive at that point, I think.
yeah. I feel out from a rhetorical perspective. I think the harder you try to convince someone of something, the more resistant they're going to be to it. Like
Mhm.
Lewis is up front in this the whole like Catholic the allegory. It's like, oh Jesus, Jesus. You just come off as like the sort of Jehovah's Witness knocking on the door. You want
Mm.
here's some personal. You know what really changed my mind on the hyper anti-Catholic stuff from when I was a kid?
Mhm.
Was hanging out with
Well,
you, right? You're Catholic,
oh,
and like you're always like a real nice guy, right?
thanks, man.
Like I'm, you know, I don't mean to like be weird about it, but like I when I because I went through a period that was very anti-Catholic, and part of that is like when I growing up, you're trying to find yourself, and like the Catholics have not always been on the super upright standing. Like the church has gone through some bad phases, and and you sort of just start like, oh well, fuck you, you're all just murderers and baby rapists, and it got to the point where like it's like I, I'm having all these like I have the Catholic category or the sort of Christian category, which is all these sorts of negative things. And on the other hand, I have Andrew, my friend, and none of these match. And I'm like, maybe I'm just being a little bigoted here, right? Like I know
Mm.
Andrew, and he's always been upstanding, and he's never raped any babies. So right, and what's really
For the
happening?
British Catholics that don't believe in that.
But what's really happening is there are virtues, and I'm seeing virtues in you. And if you hold this group as this unvirtuous group, and you have this person from this group who acts virtuously, these two things are in conflict, and you have to resolve that, or you get cognitive dissonance. And ultimately, I mellowed out on it after a few years of being very annoying. I'm sure.
Oh, I I was learning from it too. I was like more angry and stuff. Like Max, just shut up and believe anyway. But
Yeah,
yeah, no,
and
it
really,
was.
the big thing for me is you have a very high capacity for forgiveness, which is like the most important Christian trait. I think. I think that might be the entire point of the Jesus story. Um,
So,
but yeah, and when I've I think my position now is if you want to convince someone of your position, it is essential to act in the most upright and correct way and demonstrate through example who you are and why you should be, right? Like Alexander the Great for fucking centuries is the guy everyone points to as that's the leader you should be like. we don't have any writings. We have writings on Alexander, but it's not like Alexander wrote a book where he said, "I am greatest. Here is why I'm greatest. Here's what you should do." Which might be something. Alexander was a bit of a narcissist. But the reason why everyone likes Alexander is not because of anything he says. Right? We don't have any records of anything he says. We have a couple of accounts of his speech after the mutiny, and one of them's by the guy who was there. So we have something that's like approximate to what he said. But here's the really interesting thing about that speech. The speech where he's talking to his soldiers, who are all currently mutinying against him, is not why they should fall, isn't really about. He's not making a rhetorical, like, here's why it's good for you to do this. Alexander goes up there and just starts talking about things he's done with his men. And that's the reason we like him, and why everyone for centuries have liked him. It's because Alexander, in the desert, gets the last bottle of water, and he's time on the guard duties. When he doesn't have to, he's king. He acts in such a way that inspires confidence and inspires his men, that creates that love for him, because he acts upright and morally all the time. And so, you know, I think the actual arguments, like the rhetorical, like the actual talking, is secondary. And this is because you learn about pathos, ethos, and logos. I think the ethos, as much as everyone has a focus on logos, I think the sort of the prerequisite to even engage with someone when they are engaged in either pathos or logos is you have to have some sort of ethos, right? If you are someone, right, no matter how good are the points, listen, if Hitler came back to life and started making really good points, no one would listen to it. He's fucking Hitler. Right? And so I think as a prerequisite of convincing anyone of anything, you have to have first built this sort of, this self that acts in a certain way, that demonstrates yourself as a person of virtue in order for someone to listen. Because it's already, like, really hard to convince someone to change their mind on anything. And so, like, people generally are unresponsive to arguments. But, and so they have to be in a position beforehand where they're like, this is someone. And part of how you do that is sort of being a person who, like, you wouldn't mind having your mind changed by. Right? This is part of why this might be part of why Jesus is successful. Jesus, very virtuous guy. Right? He's out there, he's helping the poor, he's not hurting anybody. He's talking about how we need to love our fellow man. It's really hard to hate Jesus. Jesus is just good vibes. He's like, be nice to other people, and then they crucify him. There was a bit, a short by someone, where they ask him, like, who are the most famous humans? And he's like, oh, Jesus Christ is the most famous. Oh, it's like, what did he do? Oh, he told everyone to be nice to everyone else and love each other. It's like, oh, what happened to him? Did they make him a king? No, they killed him. Okay, who else is famous? Oh, there's Martin Luther King Jr. Oh, what did he do? Oh, he said you got to love your neighbor and be nice to everyone else. Oh, what happened with him? They shot him. And then the alien just says, okay, I'm fucking leaving. Jesus Christ. I don't know what this shit show is, but I want no part of it.
Or maybe the alien's like, oh, they want me to world dominate and cause violence. That's what they want.
But yeah, the circle this back to our main point. I think probably because I've been working for a while. It's been chugging along in the back of my brain, trying to figure out what the difference between art and propaganda is. And I got eights nowadays. I think it might be a spectrum. There's probably things that go from like pure. I think there's like a theoretical pure art and a theoretical propaganda, pure propaganda. Neither of which are like reachable, right? I mean, because even in like Nazi propaganda is propaganda. This is the one thing we can all agree is propaganda. But like Triumph of the Will, I think if you analyze it honestly, could probably find artistic merit in it. So there's got to be some level of art in it. And then art probably like Tolkien's a good example. It's art. It's very clearly art. We'd all agree it's art. But there's definitely some like there's something in there that's right this sort of Catholic element to it that might be at least somewhat propagandistic. But it's like so minor compared to like the artistic value of it that we don't mind as much, right? And then maybe on the other end, on like the extreme end of art, you get something like Dostoevsky, however you fucking pronounce it, and on the other end you get Goebbels, Dovsky, thank you, uh, and then like you get closer in the middle, you get people like Heinlein and Orwell and Rand, who are like this is a message, right? This is in some ways a propagandic message, but there's definitely artistic value in it, right? Where probably like on maybe the more artistic side we have Orwell, who's like communism, Soviet. Well, it's bad, but let me explore what this sort of ideology leads to. There's an exploration there, and then uh, Heinlein and Rand's might be a bit more on the propagandistic side. Or like, well, these are our ideas. Let's sort of go through a story, sort of demonstrate how they work, why they would work in the way they do. And then you have like, yeah, I would have to say like Heinlein and Rand are probably close to Plato in like the Republic sort of style, where there's like artistic merit, but it's philosophical. But yeah. Also, speaking of philosophical works of art, I have decided I am releasing my boycott on Bethesda. I said I was going to boycott them till they made a good game. They made a game, and I said close enough. I've heard mixed things about Starfield.
Really?
Some people like it, some people don't. I haven't played it. Um, but I really wanted to play like New Vegas and Morrowind, which I think are among your favorite games.
Okay. Absolutely, those are fantastic.
And they were
Well,
like $1 a piece, so I was like, fuck it,
Morrowind.
fuck it. Bethesda, if they're going to crash, they're
Have
going
you
to
played
crash under
Morrowind?
their own decisions. So I bought them, and
Yeah.
so New Vegas is installed. Uh, I think I did character customization probably poorly. I maxed out luck and charisma and like nothing else. And so
Well, you want speechcraft.
intelligence
That's
too.
what you want.
Which, to be fair,
Morrowind. I want to get Morrowind multiplayer, and then we can play Morrowind multiplayer.
oh, that sounds fun. Maybe we can do some of that when now that we have some more time. Assuming we finish Arcane today, we have not even
I
started.
don't think we will.
Is
I probably need to bow out at 10:30 for myself.
what is that in minutes to hours?
Oh, sorry, in an hour. In an hour.
Okay. I don't even know
Yeah.
where to start. Jesus. Um. Uh. Is what is your favorite game? Because I feel like it's New Vegas or Morrowind, but I'm not sure which your favorite game actually is.
That's a good question. It's complicated. The
Yeah.
like if I want to be as objective as possible, I've oh shoot. Okay. I might be choking in the meantime, but I'll try to say this. I have insane amounts of hours put into Skyrim. Um, even though I think Skyrim is pretty much a horrible game. Um, I think objectively the best. Oh crap! Give me a second.
Mhm. I'll talk about my favorite games while you stop dying. My favorite game has shifted over time. If you had asked me like a few years ago, I probably would have said Banner Saga. I probably put the most hours into Crusader Kings. But I think probably now is in fact Disco Elysium or Elysium, depending on how you pronounce it. I really love that game. And actually, I saw there's like a therapist who's doing a run through of it, and I said, well, why not? It's been a while, and actually, I've finished. I have 4 mason jars filled with blackberry and vodka because I'm going to make a tequila sunset, and I couldn't get the ingredients, so I had to make it myself. Um, but he's playing it, and he goes and he does the scene with the mercenary, the hanging mercenary, and he talk and you if you've played it, you have that scene where you like talk to the corpse, and he gives answers. And I remember at the time thinking the answers were like the dumbest thing in the world. He's like, "What killed you? Communism." I'm like, "Okay, buddy." And I thought this was like a reflection of his character. And now that I'm rewatching it, having played the entire game, the answers he gives are so fucking good. And you can't appreciate any of them unless you replay it because everything he says is true, but you have no idea how it's true. And so it comes off as like this merc that's this asshole merc just talking shit. But in reality, they're all like very good clues that you just don't notice. And there's so much in that game that's like it's so I love that game so much. And I'm so pissed that the guy who made it got so fucked over by that company, and that we're never going to see a Disco Elysium 2. But on the other hand, I've thought about it, and I'm not sure. I wouldn't put it past him to pull it off, but Disco Elysium just had so much stuff working for it, and one of the reasons it works so well is because it's the first game, right? You have that amnesiac sort of building that wouldn't exist in like the sequel. So I'm not sure they could do a sequel that topped the first one. So maybe it's sort of that it's good that they only got the one because it'll never jump the shark. But Disco Elysium is probably my favorite game. I have Deus Ex is one that gets talked about. I started playing it like a few years when they released Cyberpunk because it was on sale and it was supposed to be like Cyberpunk but actually good. And it's on my other PC, so I haven't finished playing it, and I don't want to just start a new game and go through everything I went before. But I
It's not an
understand
RPG. It's
Deus Ex.
yeah.
Um, Deus Ex is I think the official term is FPS. So there are choices you can make in it. There are RPG elements to Deus Ex, the original one at least.
Do you know what an immersive sim is?
Um, I can like put together the words. I think it might have a more particular definition if you want to go through it.
It's kind of there's a whole like controversy around the definition, or
As with
even if
any
it's like a
definition.
useful term or not. So, you can take the games, the Ultima games, the Thief games, the Deus Ex games, the System Shock games, BioShock 1, maybe 2, I don't know. Arx Fatalis, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, Dishonored, Deus Ex, if I haven't said that already, and Prey. And those are the immersive sims.
Okay, what's the difference between an immersive and an unimmersive sim? Or I guess a non-immersive.
Um, it's they're usually linear. They're usually level to level. They're usually like yes, you can upgrade your character. Yes, you can unlock new abilities. Um, you can get around the level in multiple different ways. You might have dialogue. You don't need dialogue. Um, levels are usually non-linear. They're usually more open, and you have different ways of getting around them. Um, you tend to play a fixed blank slate character. Um, yeah, there's just usually yeah, it's quite like you see why it's a loose
Yeah, yeah,
definition, but
yeah,
for
yeah.
whatever reason they group together as one genre.
I can sort of, from like an experience standpoint, kind of see like Deus Ex is like old now, but the level design on it, especially
Hmm.
for the time, is really cool, right? And definitely because I've played, I just on the vacation I played and beat Cyberpunk because it was on sale, and I figured why not? Apparently it's good now, and I can see the sort of the attempt to replicate that. But I remember when I played
Mm.
Deus Ex for the first time, even like years later, the level design was really cool in that just the variety. And like I would go places and I would find like this tunnel and I'd be like, "Oh, this is kind of interesting. I don't know why it's here." And then like a couple quests later, I'm like, "Oh shit. I can use this tunnel to get around this group to do this quest in this way." That I didn't even see coming. And so there's like this really cool design element that I noticed that was in those games that you see a bit less of. Like a lot of
Yeah,
design I've
yeah.
seen in like a few games is very much here are the places to go. And so but yeah, Deus Ex was like a really cool had really cool level designs. Especially for that time period, right? Like I'm playing this decades later and even I'm noticing, "Oh, this is actually kind of cool." And Cyberpunk definitely tries to do that. I don't know if it's as successful as Deus Ex even now, but as well, I think the themes are a bit more. I'm not sure Cyberpunk did as well as on the themes as it could have.
Mm.
But I'm developing a Cyberpunk tabletop game that will be.
Yeah.
Yes, It's still in work. Actually, the big development is I've decided to include. I'm building a player manual. I'm going to release one book because I'm not releasing five fucking different books. Because why would I? It's going to be free. But the big thing I'm doing is I'm going to include like 12 jobs. And so that will get you through like a year to 3 months, depending on how often you meet. Right? If you meet once a week, it'll be 3 months. If you meet once a month, it'll be a year. And the whole thing's like designed to take you through a story. And there's a couple of cool. I think the stories have like a good have some good ideas behind them. The ideas behind all of them are basically that each one will pose a weird or like some sort of difficult moral question. That's like because that's what I think is that of sort of the gaming experience, which is sort of a thing that games have not been leaning into recently, which is a little disappointing. There are exceptions, but usually it's in like the indie sphere. But I think what really makes a game a cool experience is when you get like a choice and like everything makes sense. So like this doesn't feel like some guys put a gun in your head and said kill the baby or the grandma, right? This is like a realistic question that makes sense as to why you're getting it, and it's really difficult to answer. That's why I think that's the part of games I most enjoy, especially like role playing specifically, where you get like these legitimate these moral quandary questions that don't that and it's important that they don't feel forced. Like you come across sort of organically and naturally these difficult moral questions. And then you got to think about it and figure out what is the right thing to do here. And I try to put one of those problems in each of the modules. Uh, and so uh,
Nice.
and so I have to work on it a bit, but hopefully I'll get it done. Get some of it done. And I was thinking maybe we'll play like a roll 20. I'll do one on do one with you or if you're available, and we'll do one together, and we can people can see what the game's sort of like. But
Heck yeah.
that's
Yeah, it's so good.
yeah,
I'm
that's
really I'm like very much in like an RPG headspace. I've been doing a lot of work with or like I've been reading a lot about Adventure Conquer King system. I think you'd really like it as like a sword and sorcery type game.
Well, I have a agenda now, so I will add it on to look into. Uh, this is Monday. Why does this say Monday? Should be Sunday. I'll add it. What's it called?
Adventure Conquer King system. He's got Acts 2 out now as a Kickstarter, and I backed it retroactively because it's got incredible world building and campaign building resources on it to basically like, you know how whenever you read like a DMG or like a module, it's like make sure you create interesting factions and make sure that things have like something unique about them or whatever, and uh, his thing is more like, okay, here's what you have to do to create like a good progression for a sandbox such that everything's interconnected. Here's how many low level, mid level, high level dungeons you need. Based on your territory, here's what your towns are going to be like. Here's how many, how big, what the populations are, what the random chances of high level or low level magic items are going to be, because your players are going to say, hey, DM, is there plate armor in this town? Well, there's an answer to that. It's like high rules levels, but also good consistency, and the fact that everything is there means that um, it's very easy to just like have an answer to things and like be more willing to be more sandbox and less railroady. And also, he has built in like basically like tabletop RPG mod
Oh, you've cut out. But yeah, it sounds super interesting. And part of the problem I've had
that I
is,
need because I need to
oh,
write my
you're
own
back.
setting.
You cut out a little bit, but I've gotten the gist. And that sounds like it's
Okay.
super useful. Part of the problem when writing this is I've never used modules. Right?
Mm.
Every campaign we've played where I've DM'd has just been me just doing shit. Because I figure like
Yeah, no,
if
I've
you're
never used the module either.
right, so part of this part of the process was I had to read some modules and get some ideas. But yeah, I'll check it out. I've added it to my notes. But
Sweet.
speaking of products, Andrew, you may notice in the bottom left corner of our stream is a little advertisement for a card game that has been released. You can buy it right now. A trading card game
Oh,
called Castles, now available after a long period of work. You
oh
can
my gosh.
buy. Uh, but yeah, I've released Castles, and so for anyone who doesn't know, I've talked about it a couple times on this stream, but it is a playable trading card game. Uh, there aren't like booster sets. It's very early, so there's two starter decks. So you buy both, you have all the cards. And what's what's interesting to me about it is instead of like in regular card games where like you might get a little bit of flavor text, all the characters have quotes from stories that I've made. So the Dark Winter expansion, this first one, is all characters and places and things from my upcoming book, which should release. We're aiming for December next year, or no, this year. This year, December. We're in this year now. I forgot. So you can see some of the characters, get some quotations, some excerpts from the book, and we Andrew's played it with me. I think we have a kind of an interesting, somewhat unique game style that's different from like the other big three like Pokemon, MTG, and Yu-Gi-Oh. So and it's a pretty decent price point. I think it's 19.99 to buy it, which is like 4 packs of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So I think it's relatively I think it's well priced, and it's relatively unique, and it's got cool backstories to all the things and characters. And so if you play this and then you read the book, you get to see like, oh yeah, I recognize that. There's Stianov, and there's Volgomir, and All right, sorry. There's Vegier, and there's a couple of the other ones. Oh, hey, Bannerlord is installed. Thanks. So yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff, and I think it's a pretty fun game. And we're looking, uh, they're kind of expensive to make, so the expansion's going to be like a little while out until I have like a couple $1,000 burning a hole. But it's there. You can get it, straight order it, and play it with a friend, right? You can buy both decks, and there, boom, you got a game that you and your friend can play, with different decks with different styles, and so check it out if you're interested. Read on my goal list, and let's at least do some Arcane today. What do you think, Andrew? Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do quick review. Last time we left off, things were going to shit. Oh fuck! Now I'm losing all the names.
Vi beat up Savika,
Yep.
and then
Silk.
Jinx materialized out of thin air
She
and knocked her
apparated.
out. Yes.
And Silco and Jace attempt to make a deal that doesn't seem to be going very well for Silco. And we got to see my favorite scene, where he talks to the statue of Vander. And so this is the outcome of all the decisions they have made up to this point. Let us take a look. Blood Moon Rises.
What has been spilled this night?
And so Jace has done a bit of a... I'm not sure when I use the right term, but he was very much on the all these dangerous criminals. We need to enforce harder, crush their production facilities, and now he's like, I can't fucking do this show. And I think probably
Dose
there's
of humility.
yeah, I think there's like a couple different things happening here. On one hand, right, I think this is both like I think this can be taken as a literal statement. Right, he's like, look, I made an attempt to govern, and this is beyond my capability. Things are absolutely fucked up beyond repair, and I don't got a way to fix this. And so this is sort of this is what I got. Right?
Part of it is like a rhetorical thing because like we talked about earlier, right? He's about to tell them all, you all suck. What's the best way of doing that? Saying, I suck. We all suck. We gotta change what we're doing.
That's a pretty good. You all suck, but I suck the most, right? I'm not
Yeah.
qualified. Right?
Yeah.
This is that's a good point. Part of it, I think, as well, is he just went there. He killed a kid. I think he might he's just fucking sick and tired of dealing with this. Like he said,
Yeah. No, I didn't believe it.
right? Like what the fuck's he? What's he? Is he going to go back down there? Going to kill another kid? Like analyze. There's one of the reasons why I incorrectly predicted Russia would not invade Ukraine is because in the U.S. manual for insurgency, there's like there's a ratio of how many people you need to in a place versus how many insurgents there are. I can't remember what the number is. I think it's like 1 in 5 or something. And my prediction for Russia and Ukraine was I did the math, and they have less soldiers than they would need to occupy it. That's how it is sometimes. But this is sort of a point. In order to sort of secure the Undercity, would take a massive undertaking of resources. And this is probably why under who was the name of the lady before Marcus? Grayson.
Oh
Grayson.
yes.
This is probably why Grayson never like attempted to like do anything in the Undercity, because the amount of resources it would take to hold this fucking thing is just abysmal, right? I mean, just look how much it took, like how much the U.S. spent on Afghanistan, right? And so it's easier to just like, listen, do whatever you want, just don't fuck shit up so that my bosses get mad. Right? As long as my bosses are happy, like just do whatever you want. And that's why the only time they come down is when the bosses are like, listen, you got to do something here. And so he has essentially two choices. He can do this massive fucking undertaking, which would inevitably lead to more dead kids, and which he would be responsible for, or he can sort of do the Grayson method, where he's like, just govern yourselves and don't fuck with Piltover. Do whatever you want, just leave us alone.
Mm.
And so it's a smart political strategy. It's a decently smart political strategy. The downside is it may relieve pressure, but it may also sort of allow things to fester. Right. The downside to this is you might end up with like an Israeli-Palestine situation, which is not going very well right now.
Mm.
To really pacify the Undercity, Jace is just not willing to pay whatever that cost is. It'd be like a tremendous cost. I don't know what exactly, but whatever it is, Jace ain't gonna pay it. And so the next best option is, well, let's turn the dial and maybe release some pressure by giving them some autonomy and self control. And so we end up in this position. And that's kind of another important line, right? One of the things we notice with when Heimerdinger, he just doesn't realize how shitty things have gotten in the Undercity, right? And so ironically, this is the pizza party meme. He's like, oh, all my workers are struggling. I know what I'll do. A pizza party. He's like, listen, it's too little too late. There is whatever there is no grand project that Piltover could undertake that would get the Zonites on side. Because it's just so long. And unironically, this parallels a little bit to the Israeli-Palestine conflict, right? You have generations of people who've grown up, and like the whole thing is fuck the other side, right? These people are keeping us down, and they're pieces of shit, and they don't care about us. Fuck them, and we need to fight. Right? This is reflected in we see how Vi talks about the Pilties. Right? She wants to fight. She wants to stick it to them. She wants to fucking rob them and shit. And that's like an ideology that is pervasive through the Undercity. Right? No one likes the Pilties. And so it's very hard to just say, hey, we know you think that we're responsible for literally all your problems, and in some ways we are, in some ways we aren't, right? Like most things, it's complicated. And I know you're sort of mad that we did that sort of massacre on the bridge where we killed all your friends and parents and whatnot. But hey, you want to bury the hatchet?
Oh man.
Just forgive and forget. It's what Jesus would do. They're going to say, no, fuck
Oh,
you,
Mac,
buddy.
they haven't heard about him yet.
Jesus has not
Dominicans
come yet.
the Dominicans haven't reached this far yet with their preaching.
One day. To be fair, if the Franks the Franciscans were there, they would be in the Undercity. So
Quite possibly, yeah. I've been well, okay. Quick side tangent. Saint Francis. I've been reading an actual biography of him. Very interesting. And he'd be like invited to the courts of cardinals and stuff because they thought he was so cool, and he'd like feel like spiritually unwell. He'd be like, this is like way too much of like pomp and stuff. Like I shouldn't be here, and he'd just leave. Anyways,
you wanna hear a controversial take? You wanna hear a hot take,
sure.
Andrew?
All right.
St. Francis of Assisi was the original Cathar. That's right, I said it. Andrew is either like face palming horrifically, or he's doing
I don't even know how to begin. I'm pretty sure the Cathars wouldn't like were already around at his time or before.
maybe I don't know. I don't know church history that well. I just know enough that there's probably, I mean, I would imagine if I looked into it, there's probably some differences, but there's some similarities, right? Uh, Saint Francis of Assisi is a little Saint Francis is a little punk rock. I don't know what to tell you. Right? He shows up
He's
and he's
old.
like, "Oh, I've listened to Jesus. We gotta cast off our material possessions and serve the kingdom of God and help people. And why are you so rich?" And he lives in the forest. He's a punk rock hippie. He's great. Uh, though interestingly, I've been thinking about one of the things. You might have a comment on this. This is unrelated to anything. But I was watching a Franciscan friar that we both know, and
Ah,
I think you will immediately guess who it is.
yep.
And they were talking about what's it, the young pope, and there's
Oh,
and you know they're probably on the more Catholic side of it, right? But they're talking about that scene where whatever the actor's name, I can't remember. He's the guy who's playing the pope, puts on like all these
yeah.
rings and like the shoes and whatnot.
Yeah,
And
and like the like what's it called?
it's playing the yeah, I know it, when whatever it is. And they're sitting there and they're talking about obviously they disagree with the interpretation of that scene. Because I don't think you can be in the Catholic Church and be like, yeah, the Pope's blinged out for the sake of uh risen up the homies or whatever, right?
I don't know. Maybe.
But I was watching and one of them's like, the red shoes or the blood of the martyrs and their symbolism and whatnot. But I remember I'm just
Hmm.
watching that whole scene and thinking, yeah, but can you take it to heaven?
Hmm.
You know? Like I'm just saying, like I don't
No,
mean to sort of
definitely.
critique the histories of Catholicism, but I'm just thinking like, what if Jesus come like that scene where Jesus he goes like, can I go and talk to go and tell my family where I'm going? And Jesus is like, no, come and follow me immediately. And he says, well, hold on, I got a very nice ring. It's very symbolic.
A very nice ring, yeah.
And Jesus goes, oh, okay then, go get the gold ring, but don't tell your wife. And I just feel, you know, I just think of I've always there was like a period of time where I was genuinely a pretty devout Catholic, and I was really uncomfortable with the idea of like metal crucifixes and metal crosses. Like I would see people wearing sort of like, and this is not to dunk on anyone. This is sort of a personal thing. See people wearing like gold and it gets really insane. Like if you've seen like the fucking Romanian gangsters who've got like the giant cross the size of their chest studded with diamonds and like gemstones and it's made out of pure gold and there's this giant gold chain. And I'm just sitting there thinking, I feel like you may have missed the point.
Yeah.
And like there's a spectrum, but I always felt like if you're going to wear a cross, make it out of wood. The actual cross was wood. Jesus was a carpenter. It makes most thematic sense to be wood, and it's not like a precious metal, which is like the whole thing. Give to Caesar what is. You can't carry your riches into the kingdom of heaven. It's harder for a rich man to pass through the eye of a needle, or a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, than for a rich man to get into heaven. I feel like I feel like I just have this sort of, and I guess it's worth a bit less now because I'm not Catholic, but I always had this like people would show up like these gold and silver, and I'm like, I just look at it, and I'm like, I feel like a point is being missed here. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you have any
I
thoughts?
see where you're I see where you're coming from. I tended to prefer where I wore a wooden cross for a while. I have a metal one now because it has like a Benedictine metal on it and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to like
Um
shit on anyone
but
who does,
no,
right?
but it's a good point though. It's a good point. Well, I have more thoughts about the Pope thing than about wearing the cross. Because the whole point of why the Pope actually is like that is because he is like an actual earthly king.
Oh, you've cut out again. But I'm gonna guess your
Pius XII was going through all these processions. He looked like he was like ascending or something. He was always like having his arms outstretched and stuff. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is like so much like pomp and whatever." It seemed weird to me. And then I was thinking about it and I saw a mass, a Latin mass where there's a moment during the mass where if it's done by a bishop, there's a few garments like there's like gloves and hats and I forget what it's called, the chasuble I think, where the bishop will just sit there while the servers like put the gloves and the chasuble and stuff on him. And I was thinking about that like my goodness, like people are gonna see this and think like what an like arrogant like display here. But then I'm like, wait a second, what man, what grown man wants to sit there and be like dressed by people? And it occurred to me, and then I this was kind of in various conversations kind of enforced, I guess, that like bishops and stuff and the Pope when they are enduring all this pomp and stuff, it's not because um they I mean like okay so on one hand let's say they're wicked, let's say they're evil, let's say they're obsessed with money and whatever, then it's like okay well you've received your reward, right? You have a huge responsibility. um yeah, you're not going to take that stuff with you to heaven. You've lived well in wealth and selfishness while
oh no, you've cut out again. It was
if
important.
you're like a
Sorry,
steward
you've cut
of
out, and I felt like it was an important part. But
okay.
you said the last thing we got was you've lived in like selfishness and weakness or whatever. This is your, and then you cut off. So you're just talking about this is how you lived.
Right, so you've lived selfishly, and basically, if you die, it's like, okay, well, you've received your reward. Like, there's a line like that in the gospel where like the Pharisees have received their reward. Because like you better hope you had a good life because you're not going to enjoy the rest of eternity. Um, and so, um, alternatively, the Pope and the Bishop who is humble and who's like, I don't necessarily want to be like why would I want to like sit here and like have people dress me and stuff and like have all these like riches and whatever. I wouldn't, but I'm literally like it's supposed to remind me that like I have a crazy important job to do, that I'm here representing my office and God's will rather than the will of some guy, which is why when you have like Pope Francis, for example, saying like, "Oh, who is Pope Francis?" and he says like, "Well, I'm a sinner." Well, that's great, but then like moving away from the titles and stuff and being like, "Well, this is my opinion. This is my opinion." It's like it's all well and good for you to have an opinion, but you have a more important job to do that goes beyond your opinions. Um, and kind of taking away those symbolisms and trying to be more personable and stuff, you're actually kind of hurting the job you're supposed to be doing and be detached from that.
Mm.
Really, the honor given to Christ because they represent Christ's kingdom. They're basically his mortal agents stewarding over the kingdom on Earth. So it's an important job to do, and they deserve to be shown that respect. It's a matter of whether or not they're going to be actually like doing that job or not, which is resolved in the Last Judgment. So that's what's kind of going on there.
All right. Yeah.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of get where you're coming from. Um, Fortunately, I don't know if you're aware of this, Andrew. I'm actually not a cardinal, nor even more surprisingly, am I pope, so I don't have to worry about any of these things.
Are you sure you don't want to become Pope?
Just get like a letter in the mail. We've chosen you as we couldn't decide on a proper cardinal, and we just gave up and picked randomly. Congratulations. Here's the thing though. Like looking at the Bible, that's not something that God wouldn't do. Like I could totally see a story where like God picks like some just fucking like the worst possible person, and then just like following the narrative about through him sort of makes this great pope. It's basically the story of what's it fucking was it Paul who was originally the guy who's going around killing Christians and then he has the revelation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
I'm just saying it wouldn't be out of character.
Yeah, totally. No, I think that there's probably been like I know Pope Gregory was like a monk before.
Oh, there was I can't remember the name now, but I remember reading about this one guy who desperately did not want to be pope to the point where he's like trying to flee the city after they've chosen him. Like Jesus Christ, thank you for the opportunity, but I gotta get out of here. He's like trying to escape the city. He's like, no, the guards are getting him. You're gonna be pope, and you're gonna like it. No.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think I'd probably rather a pope like that than one like the fucking the what are they called, the Gorgias or whatever.
Oh
People
yeah, the
fucking
Borgias,
holding
yeah.
orgies and like like what the fuck are you doing?
Yep. 100%. 100%.
But you know what? The Gorgias are the type of people that would wear the giant fucking gold cross with all the gems. And what's the most hilarious about it to me is that it's fucking gangsters wearing it. Like you've somehow not only have you missed the one point, you've missed literally every other fucking point of the story. You're out there like, yeah, you know, I run prostitution rings and steal and you know kill people, but you know I got the cross, so and I'm hyper rich, but I got the cross, so I'm definitely good with the big JC.
Well, that's the thing, right? It becomes a question of when you're at your last judgment, you don't get to take all that stuff, like you said. Will they have received their reward on Earth, or will they have will they be able?
There's an animated show. I've never watched it, but I saw a clip from it that was hilarious. It's about this priest that the mob boss got, and of course they for, strangely enough, like a lot of the big like the mafia and a lot of these organized crime syndicates tend to be very religious, which is like this weird sort of oxymoron.
Yeah, it's weird, eh?
Right, and
A lot of them do that. The Italians and the Russians both do that.
yeah, uh, and there's like that great scene in The Godfather where he's like, where he asks the priest for forgiveness, and the priest is like, "I do not," and he's like, "I don't think you are truly sorry, and I don't think that this will be the end. I don't think this will be the last time you do it, but I forgive you enough." Right? But there's
Oh.
this great bit where they're like they got this priest on the payroll. And so every time they go to a hit, they keep him in the back of the car. So anytime anyone gets shot, they can go, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." He can pardon them.
Oh my gosh.
And there's like a great scene where they rob the bank, and he comes into the getaway car, and the priest is sitting right next to him. "Bless me, Father," for as he's stealing the money.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow.
And I feel like any like reasonable priest would be like, "Okay, first thing you have to do, return the money."
Absolutely.
and and turn yourself
Absolutely.
in.
Absolutely.
But it's like
Yeah, I mean, because it's totally a fake confession. You're not sorry at all. You don't even have like, I don't know, like if you even have like the slightest like fear of hell, let alone actual like contrition, you wouldn't meet you.
I feel like I could predict how that conversation goes.
Mhm.
It'd be they go up to Saint Peter and he's like, no, none of those counted, and they would say something like, well, the priest, your representative. It'd be like they immediately shift them with, like, yeah, it's really on
Yeah.
you guys. But
Well,
I
that's what
feel
Adam tried to do. That's what
oh,
Adam
that's
tried to
right.
do.
He's like,
Yeah.
it's Eve's fault. I forgot. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no,
right.
not even that. It was Eve's fault who you gave me as
Uh,
a wife.
oh, and I bet the response would be like basically the same. He's like, like I feel like if you're robbing the bank and driving away with the priest, you gotta know you're not really doing things above board here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It like you there's oh, this is moral foundations theory. There's an interesting I feel like I've brought moral foundation theory before, but it's basically the idea that there's like these innate subconscious ideas of right and wrong, which if like you're a religious person, you would say, well, the whatever particular deity you believe in has sort of imprinted into you, right? Like you have this idea already constructed without like any sort of framework of what is right and what is wrong, right? Like most, I mean, there are exceptions, like with sort of the neurodivergent, but like most people, like, should you go around killing babies? That just feels wrong, and you can't really explain it, but they just feel. And I feel like thinking about it, this might be the reason why things are the way like these groups are super religious. It might be the case that just the people in these sort of organizations have just this whacked sort of internal compass, or like a less sensitive moral compass, and that's why they can maintain the sort of the religious elements with the sort of the clearly wrong actions they take, right? What was it? Sopranos has like a bunch of scenes where Tony Soprano goes and talks to the psychiatrist, and you see how he like sort of self justifies all of the actions he takes. Right? There's like a great line where he's like, "Listen," he pulls, unironically, he pulls the murderer versus killer distinction. He's like, I'm not murdering other people. They're all soldiers for these other families. So it's basically like we're in a war. So it's just killing, not murdering. And it's like, huh. I see what you're attempting to do here. But but yeah, no, none of this has to do with Arcane. I think we've gotten through like 10 seconds of it. So let's do a bit more.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it makes the point that they're right not to trust us, and this is sort of the trust is earned, not given. And if you're anyone this like for the past however long, you're like, well, what's happening today? We're getting fucked over by the Pilties. All right, let's go to work. It's like, why would they start trusting us now? And tellingly, the Kiraman over here doesn't offer rebuttals. Like, why wouldn't they trust us? We've done this and this and
I have a
this, or
question.
and this and this, and for these reasons, we're very trustworthy. She's like, oh, don't you fucking, you're walking a fine line. Don't you be talking shit. This is very clear. We deserve trust, not that we've earned trust.
Right. Well, they don't want someone like of their own criticizing them
Yeah,
and
that's
being
true
a
too.
bit of an agent of chaos among them, right?
Right.
A
Like
bit comfortable.
obviously,
We have this perfect system where we're the oligarchs, we gain from each other. The capitalist guy gets his, his deals done. The Heimerdinger gets to, hang out and do research and whatever. what's her name? I don't know. You know, we see them all like having this balance, right? And like gaining from each other, but
Perfectly
not really wanting
balanced.
to do anything beyond that. And then this Jace guy comes in and he's starting to be like, yeah, like I become base. I've decided to
I,
reject my cringe.
I have become base destroyer of cringe. Mr. Mr. Heimerdinger, your invention, Jap Melter Megalodon 3000, has been used in an unexpected way. But the thing I wanted to sort of bring attention to, what's super interesting, I think, is what's shown in these scenes, not based on what they say, but based on what they don't. Like the parallel here is Vi when she's talking to Jace earlier, and she says, "Yeah, you just throw him in a box and forget it," and Jace just doesn't address it and moves on. And the reason he's doing that is because he doesn't have a good counter argument, right? It's a subtle admission that she's right, but instead of like addressing it, he just doesn't want to deal with that. And I think there's a parallel happening here, where the fact that she's constructed an argument that doesn't defend her point, merely criticizes Jace for being for uppity, I guess, is in itself a demonstration that what he's saying is right, at least in her sort of understanding of what's happening, but she doesn't want to address that fact, and she wants to sort of just sweep it under the rug. And I think this has happened in a couple scenes, so I thought it was worth pointing out. Which is a very funny line. And I think Jace is sort of he's catching on to that a bit. She's like he's like, "Oh, you better fucking win." He's like, I don't give a shit." Right? And part of that is
Yeah.
like, this is a direct attack against me. Go for it. I'm the one who's I'm already saying I'm shit.
He figured out the way not to get canceled. He doesn't care.
Yes. Yes, who gives a shit? I don't care. And the problem with that for them is, if he doesn't care about these sort of attacks on like unironically, I think Jace would be, if you push him on, he'd say, "Sure, kick me off the council. Just follow the fucking plan. I don't care." I think he's literally at that point where he'll like throw everything else out. Just fucking make peace and move on with everyone's life. He doesn't care. And the problem with that for the council is that means they have to address what he's actually saying, which is the one thing they don't want to do. Right? The whole point of her statement is watch yourself, right? Jace, under their framework, Jace should be looking out for his own interests and his own deals. And that's what's really being threatened here. She's like, watch yourself. You want to work with us. Don't be shitting on us. And his response, where he's like, I don't give a shit what any of you think. He's saying, fuck it. Burn all the deals. He's pulling the Joker move where he sets the money on fire. He doesn't burn them. I don't care. But I'm fucking right, and you know it. Right? And that's, none of them have a response. I don't give a shit what any of you think. And no one's got an encounter. Because their entire power is based on what they are, those sorts of deals, right? You need to work with me because it stands to benefit you. And now that Jace does not care about the benefit to him, that power has evaporated. It's, to Dark Knight again, it's the Bane scene. I paid you, and that gives you some power over me? No, he doesn't care. And if you can't, they can't appeal to his selfish interests, and that's how they do their deals. And so they're just fucked here, and they have to sit and listen. And then, I don't know. What do you have any thoughts on this line where he's like, "Mel, you're right. You were always right." Um, I have sort of mixed feelings on the line. On one hand, he could be like sort of applying to like how Mel was like the problem with Mel in this line to me personally is that Mel starts out sort of pro war and then shifts. And to be fair, like looking at it, her position's a bit more nuanced. She wants the capability to defend themselves, but not use it. Um, but Jace doesn't address it as much, so it sort of I wonder if like from Jace's perspective, it would kind of feel like she's on side weapons and then shifts a bit because like he goes into the meeting thinking everyone's going to agree with him. The one where he says about going down to the Undercity, and then Mel disagrees with him, and I don't think he was expecting that. But I don't know. I feel like Mel's motivations are not clear enough to Jace to warrant this statement. Uh, what do you think, or do you have any thoughts on this statement, Andrew?
Just on a statement that he cares about what she says.
Well, he says that she's right and that she was always right, and I feel like Jace at this point would either pick.
Yeah,
Sure, go ahead.
that her perspective hasn't been all that either well defined or communicated, or it just comes across as changing to Jace. I mean, I
I think
think
it was
you're right.
poorly communicated to Jace.
Yeah.
I think it's decently defined, but I think we understand that definition because
Yeah.
of the interactions with her mom that Jace doesn't see, only we see.
Right. So I don't exactly know what Jace is saying that she's right about and that she was always right about, unless he's realizing or something that she thought that all the time. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I'm not sure.
Right. So you
Um,
can sort of see why I have sort of mixed feelings on this.
I don't know. It seems like I don't know. Jace likes his coworker.
Oh, he's just trying to riz her up.
I don't know. I don't know. Like that's the thing. It's like I'm not. I don't know what is it that they work together on? Like, remember the episode when Victor was first figuring out his hex core thing, and
Mm-hmm.
then they like intercut between like them like basically like sleeping together, I guess. Um, what did they? Yeah. But what did they talk about in that episode? What did they like? What agreement did
Family. She
they
talked
sort of
about.
come to that?
I think it was she was talking about her family.
Mm. Mm.
I might have to go back and rewatch. This is the problem with taking month-long breaks. But I think it was
Yeah.
where his family. I might be confusing the forge scene. Oh, she comes in angry, right? And then she comes in angry. Then he tells her that Victor is dying, and then she's like sympathy, and then they bang.
'Cause I honestly quite did not like Mel for a while because she was very much manipulating him the whole time. I didn't really understand to what. We probably talked about this before.
I'm not sure we did. Where we talk about characterization. Hers, I so Mel. I think by the end of it, they've created sort of a coherent character for her. But up until that point, it sort of feels a bit all over the place. Um, where she like starts off as a bit manipulative and selfish, but then there's like altruistic elements, and then there's like a question of whether she's manipulating Jace or she cares for Jace, and by the end of it, she like kind of cares for Jace, which is. I mean, it's. I feel like by the end of it, they've managed to make it all coherent, which is fine. I think probably like if I were to levy some criticism at it, I think it makes her a bit like a less interesting character if she is manipulative, but with like good intentions. Mainly because I don't think
What's Mel's character arc? Is her character
I don't think she really has a character arc. I think her
and wanting to make weapons
oh you know what
to then caring about people and their kind of
her character arc
way of
is
thinking?
caring about the Medarda family to caring about her new family. That's what the arc is, right? She goes from very much concerned about her place in the family, right? I'm the richest in Piltover, but the poorest Medarda. And then by the end of it, in this scene, she's going to give up her ring, and she's essentially abandoning the family. And so the arc is going from this girl who desperately wants to be part of her, who's been cast out and desperately wants readmittance, to someone who has found a new family. That's her basic arc.
Okay.
Um, which I mean, I guess is sort of a fine arc. I
I guess ultimately what boils down to this scene is that I don't understand why Jace is saying I agree with when her opinion is have weapons but don't use them, but his opinion is I don't want to get involved with them. He tells Silco if we have a war we will destroy you. So I don't know. I don't know what she was right about, I guess ultimately is the conclusion I'm taking away.
yeah, I brought it up because I don't understand the line. For it feels like a bit of a girl power line where he's like, "Oh, you
Yeah.
you lady speaker were the smart one, and I was the dumb one." But I also I feel like the show has demonstrated enough sort of ability that I don't think they were writing things with purely the intent of like this weird sort of like what Batgirl does or whatever, where it's like or Miss Marvel, where like the female characters can do like horrible shit, but it's all okay because they're women. But I can't figure out.
Yeah, I don't feel like we get that really that much in Arcane though.
Yeah, the people, the writers for the show are very good, and that's why this line is so puzzling because I don't know what the intention behind it is,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like the people writing aren't the kind of people who would just like for the lack of because the people calling the show woke are a little cancer. But I don't think they would just. I
Well,
feel like they wouldn't
I
just.
mean, well, like I've accepted that woke is just like a stupid nothing term that doesn't mean anything.
Which is a shame because it did mean something once upon a time.
Maybe, yeah.
This is sort of the problem. This is literally the problem with the everyone I disagree with is Hitler. Everyone overuses every fucking term, and then nothing means anything.
Mm.
Like if I told you someone's racist,
I mean,
you have no
Hitler is
idea
pretty
what the
woke.
fuck I mean.
Yeah.
I unironically I could go, oh, he's a racist. What do you mean? Well, he marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. Oh, okay. That makes coherent sense based off the history of this word's usage. And like on the other hand, like fucking, oh, it's a woke. Oh, what's woke about it? Oh, it has a suspicious amount of female characters. Oh, okay. That makes
Well,
sense with how it's used.
yeah. Well, I mean, like you also get like, well, you're a racist if you give black people compliments or something, or
Right.
like these like nuanced things that are like interpreted as racist. But then you also
Right.
get like you're woke if you're if like your threshold of how gay your thing is just a little bit too high, then it's woke. But if the gay is limited, then like it's not woke. What's the threshold for that anyway? And like
This is why I say
what exactly is the difference between like there's a point where like woke and anti woke come full circle, and it's just the same thing.
perfectly balanced. That's all we should. This is why I say the greatest advocate for communism in the past 100 years was Bill O'Reilly. Because anytime the government did something, it's communism. Oh, there was a
Mm.
healthcare system that saved this person's life. Communism. And people went, oh, so if the government stops me from dying, that's communism. I don't like dying. I must be a communist.
Wait, was he criticizing communism or was he trying to make communism look good?
No, he's anti-communism. But the mistake he
Mm.
makes is that everything he doesn't like becomes communism. And so everything that
Ah,
isn't like extreme, well, I don't know if we would categorize Bill O'Reilly as extreme right. For the time, he was definitely extreme right. So like, healthcare in any form is communism. And you get people who are like, well, I'm fucking drowning in medical bills. I guess I'm a communist then. And it's like, no,
gotcha.
there are non-communistic ways. Like, listen, there's a very wide spectrum. But ironically, like, Bill O'Reilly takes the position that anytime the government does something, that's communism. And literally quotate this a direct quote from Richard Wolff, the communist economist.
Hmm.
Anytime the government does something, it's communism. Firefighters? You believe in firefighters? You're a communist. And then you're like, well, Jesus Christ, I don't want my house burning down. I guess I'm a communist. But yeah, this is sort of the problem with like the dilution of terms. Um, to be, I was going to say fascism is another example, but fascism always was kind of a very fucking indescribable. There's an essay from
Yeah.
Orwell. The entire point of the essay is he's trying to figure out what the fuck fascist means. And you know what his Orwell's conclusion is? Orwell's
That you can't figure
unironic conclusion is he has no idea what the fuck it's supposed to mean. He's like, I've went
it.
through all the evidence
Incredible.
and I have no clue. He unironically he concludes that it means something. And that is the entirety of what he figures out. It's like it means something. It's referring to something, and I can't figure out what. But I mean, this is why you have like there are historians. Like this was more popular with sort of lay people, but now I'm seeing some people who are like historians who will argue that the Nazis weren't fascist. And like there exists an argument there, but I think when we're making that argument, we're straying pretty far from what we're actually. So when this isn't related to anything, but there are people who are like doing history or who are historians who will say that there are differences between. So there's fascism with big F, which is like Italian fascism, and like the derivative fascisms. And Nazism is
Mhm.
clearly inspired by Italian fascism. But a lot of these early ideologies aren't very coherent. Like Mosley is probably the most coherent because he shows up at the end and he's like, okay, well, let's make this coherent. Like Nazism's very weird because on one hand it's inspired by fascism, but on the other hand the Italians are like a lesser race, so we can't really acknowledge those things. But on the other hand, like all the fascists sort of start out as socialists, so there's all these elements, and then there's just the practical reality of I want to get elected. How do I do that? And so these parties become very sort of muddled and mixed and incomprehensible. And then like the Nazis are very anti-Jew, and the Italian fascists are not really anti-Jew. Or I don't have enough historical competence to say that, but they're definitely like less anti-Jew than the Nazis, and the Nazis are definitely influencing them to be more anti-Jew. But this is literally not related to anything. The point is that when words enter the lexicon, you know, you know what I think is happening? Effectively,
Mhm.
so Charles Dickens writes. I promise this is related. Writes with a what's it called? The one with the ghosts. Is it called Christmas Carol?
I believe so. Christmas Carol.
And so Scrooge constantly says humbug.
Yeah.
And you're like, why is he saying humbug? Because you're reading in a modern context. But really, because humbug is a swear word at that time, right? He's basically saying
Hmm.
fucking Christmas. This goddamn
Hmm.
fucking piece of shit Christmas. Right? That's what he's basically doing. And that puts it in different context. They're like, Mr. Scrooge, do you want to go to the Christmas party? Fuck you, you piece of shit. Like, it suddenly takes on a very different connotation. And actually, there was a very interesting video I watched where where this guy predicted what future swear words will be based off of
Hmm.
how swear words sort of develop. And I think what is essentially happening is these terms like fascist and Nazi and whatnot are just becoming sort of swear word insults, right? Instead of calling someone you son of a bitch, you call them you fucking Nazi, right? It's just entering that class of words. And really,
Interesting.
right? Think when you call someone a son of a bitch, are you really saying that their mother is in fact literally a female dog? No, you're not. You're just calling them an asshole. When you're calling them an asshole, are you saying they're literally an asshole? No, you're saying they're not a nice person, right? You're not saying they're literally a piece of shit. They're like pieces of shit are fucking people. I don't want to be around shit because it smells bad and it's gross and I fucking hate it, just like you. Like a Nazi. I don't want to be around Nazi. They're fucking gross and disgusting, and they have these terrible beliefs, and I fucking hate them just like you. And that's really what's I think what's happening with these words. And and if you're using those words in those ways, then by definition, definition might not be there, but they effectively have no meaning, right? When you call someone a son of a bitch, the meaning is clear, right? I don't like you, and that's really what you're conveying, and that's all that means. And so when they're calling someone a Nazi, they're just saying I don't like you, and that's really all that means, and that's why it gets diluted in the way it does.
Right.
I forget how we've gotten to this point. We should probably do some more Arcane. I think we're going to.
Yes.
How much time do you got left?
Actually, I would probably wrap up already.
Okay. You want to finish this scene then?
Can we? Because it intercuts, doesn't it? It's constantly intercut between this and the other one.
Okay, I mean this scene before it intercuts. So like
Oh, okay.
about a minute or two left.
Let's, yeah, let's give it a shot.
All right. What? Independence? What? So they are clearly not fans of the plan, which is
Yeah, I actually don't like that like it's a cool dramatic effect that this is the reaction that we see, but I don't like it. It's not it's like what are they saying? That's important. Like what causes the guy to
so. I probably need to hear a
it,
bit
it
about what.
reminds me of it reminds me of this scene in Sherlock Holmes. Let me find it. Um uh
So the
send it. It's just a picture that yeah.
criticism I've heard of this scene a lot is why do you even fucking care? You don't like these people, you hate these people, and they are and you like do nothing with them, and you just constantly trying to get. Why do you care if you own this? This is the criticism I've heard. Is this similar to what you're thinking, or are you thinking something different?
No, I just don't like the way it's shot. I don't like how they just start screaming and it's all dramatic. It's like
Oh, okay. So it's what's it? Too much anger too soon.
Yeah, just like show me the argument in this case. Show me the argument, and then if they get angry, then like show me that, and I'll show you. Have you seen Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr., the second one with Moriarty?
I have, but it's been a long time.
Do you remember the scene when they fall off the waterfall?
Is this after they played the chess game?
Right after the chess game.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm sending it to you on Discord general. Oh, teleporting. Whoops. Um, when you see that scene, Moriarty, they just thought through this fight that they're gonna have, and they both realize like clearly Moriarty's gonna win this fight. And so Holmes decides, okay, well, if the only way that this is gonna work if we fall off the waterfall and I take him down with me. So he jumps off the waterfall. The and they're
Sorry,
falling,
you
and
cut
Holmes
off.
has his eyes
They jumped
shut.
off the waterfall and what?
They jumped off the waterfall, and Holmes has his eyes shut, and Moriarty is screaming, just in pure rage. This guy who's been a mastermind this whole time is just like unleashing his like utter like psychopathy, basically. And then this guy who's been eccentric and funny and figuring things out as he goes this whole time is now like completely calm. And it's not the strongest moment either, but like there's some sort of thematic thing there. It's a highly tense moment. They just were about to kill each other in this fight, um and yeah, it's just completely quiet. And I think that is makes a lot more sense than it getting all dramatic and quiet here in Arcane.
Yeah. Thinking about it a little bit. Like on one hand, I was going to say, well, they don't really have any arguments, but psychologically, even if you don't have any arguments, your brain will come up with bad arguments to just justify to yourself why it happens, even like just utter bullshit, because it wants to protect you from that cognitive dissonance. So I could totally see like in a real scenario, they're like, well, hold on, we're actually great for the Undercity, and then just list dumb fucking reasons why it would, and then
Yeah,
the
I think what should have happened here is they do start arguing and they all start saying nonsense like we have rules for a reason. We have, this is gonna ruin everything, disrupt my trade, disrupt this, and then and Jace just walks away and that's it. But you can't do that because you have to have them all get blown up in a minute. So I'm not
yeah,
sure.
yeah, part of it is going to be like time factor, right? Like half of this episode is going to not quite, but almost half of this episode is going to be Jinx and Bai, and part of what I assume the writers are doing, they're like, okay, we need to make cuts where we can so everything works in a timely fashion. So they probably wouldn't have the time to do it, so they just jump to it. But on the other
Sure,
hand,
but the
I
the
would agree
effect
with you
the
on
effect.
principle
Mhm.
that the scene probably jumps to angry a bit too quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
It's sort of it's like real rare for people to just blow up unexpectedly. There's usually a little bit of build up.
Mhm.
And it feels like I kind of agree. There isn't a ton of build up here, but yeah, I'm going to probably agree with you. And then yeah, let's finish off the scene a little bit. We got Medarda here looking at her ring, which is symbolic of her family. Yada yada. Is she going to side with Jace and try to do the right thing, or is she going to side with her mom, which is her big character conflict? Which it's a little bit of an issue. I think that it might have been it's introduced. I feel does Mel's mom show up literally last episode? I think
Yeah,
it's literally episode 8. It showed up and then she
one
gets
or
this
one or
whole
two episodes ago.
it, I feel sort of mixed. On one hand, she's like a side character, and so I don't expect the same level of depth in her that the other sort of characters receive. On the other hand, if you're going to put this sort of focus on a side character, you probably need a bit more. But like she's definitely treated better and given more than Finn. Um, I kind of wonder, maybe it would have been better if they got like a full half season, like 13 episodes, right? And let them expand a bit more on some of these side characters. Because one of the things I praise the show for is that they've essentially cut all the fat from the show. Everything that's unnecessary is gone. But I worry, or it feels like sometimes that in that effort to cut all of all the fatty unnecessary bits, they've also sliced off a little bit of what was probably a little necessary. They've sliced off some of the meat. And I wonder if we had like a full half season, a full 13 episodes, which really, episode 9 is just 4 more episodes. If maybe it would have, if we could have given a bit more time to people like Finn and Mel, that might have fleshed them out a little bit more and made it a little bit better. But on the other hand, another 4 episodes might be a bit much for where they are. Maybe like an episode or like a 12. I don't know. I'm just saying. I think they cut out some parts that could have been. I think they've cut out some of the, in their effort to be as efficient as possible. They've cut out some bits that probably should have been included. What do you think, Andrew?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe.
All right. Oh, and that's the end.
Yeah. Okay. Huh.
It is literally one scene.
I know. I'm sorry.
It's all good. We're just coming back.
We
Next
will finish Arcane next week.
week when it is the actual tea party. I think we literally did a minute of Arcane.
Hey, it was a good minute, and also we talked about really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's all good. Probably shill some shit real quick. Andrew's got a book and got a video game that you can buy on Steam. Not the book. The book's on Amazon. The game's on Steam. You can buy both. You can go to his channel, subscribe. Subscribing is free. There's a Patreon. There is in fact, a game. What's it? A course?
Yeah, programming course.
Yeah, programming course. So if you want to get into programming, it's you can go over to Andrew's and learn about programming. On my end, you have my website in the description, and Castles now available for $19.99 per starter deck. You can play with your friends. You can do whatever you want. We got some interesting cards. We got some interesting. I try to make it so that every card has like an effect that is usable in some way. So there aren't any, or at least I try to make it so there aren't any like trash cards. All the cards are like they do something interesting. And you can see, and there's a picture of all the cards on the website, so you can go through and take a quick look at what they sort of look like as well. There's a lot of interesting art, lots of talented artists we got on board to make a bunch of different cards. Order now. Aside from that, we will be back to regular weekend streaming, I believe. Andrew, we're streaming next week.
Yeah.
So we should weekly streams as per usual. And we're getting close to the end, so we'll have to figure out what we're doing next. But we're getting close. Until then, Andrew, is there anything you wanted to show quickly?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment.
Oh, and there's a mod. You have a mod for Skyrim and whatnot.
Oh yeah. Yep.
All that information and more is available on Andrew's YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe. Until then,